UFC 282 betting and DraftKings show. We have 13 fights this weekend. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the bantamweight division, we have UFC debutant, fresh off Contender Series, Cameron Saaiman, coming in as a sizable favorite. Now, he was originally scheduled to face Ronnie Lawrence, who had to pull out of the fight. Now he's been replaced by Steven Koso, who is a 6-0 prospect, undefeated. All 6 wins have come by first round submission. He's a big underdog here in the plus 250 range, and it makes sense because we have yet to see him really be tested. I mentioned the 6 wins by first round submission, but these are against complete bums on the regional scene. He actually doesn't have a win over anyone with a winning record. Not that this is a huge level step up to Cameron Saaiman, who also has faced subpar competition on the regional scene. He is the former bantamweight champion over an EFC promotion, and I actually bet against him on Contender Series against Josh Wong Kim, who I thought was going to have a clear grappling edge, and we just didn't see it. And part of that is because Wong Kim got hit a lot, he got flustered, and he gassed out and just sort of gave up. I think Cameron Saaiman does have defensive grappling holes that can be exposed here. So I think the way to target Koso, and the way that I actually targeted him, is by first round submission. That's the way that he's won all of his fights. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, comes from a 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu background. That's basically all he's trying to do. So if he were able to pull off that big upset, I think it comes by first round submission. I don't hate a small poke. I played half a unit at first round sub at plus 1600 on FanDuel. That's actually still available at the time of this recording. Overall, I do think Saaiman probably just blitzes forward like we've seen him do many times, lands a couple power shots if Koso is unable to get it to the ground. So Saaiman by knockout is going to be the official pick, but I don't mind getting at least a little bit of exposure to Koso on DraftKings for the potential to finish early, because I do think Saaiman is green, he's young, he's got holes. I don't think this guy is like a stud prospect by any aspect. So that's going to be the official pick, Saaiman by knockout, but I have a half a unit play on first round sub on Koso, just at a big number. And next fight up in the flyweight division, Vinicius Salvador comes in as a minus 200 favorite with Daniel De Silva on the comeback at plus 170. And this is another great fight to target on DraftKings. The under 1.5 in a flyweight fight is steamed to the tits here, because Daniel De Silva, we've seen time and time again, the way that he fights, he's like the Walmart version of Terrence McKinney, because he's going to come at you for about 2.5 minutes before he completely cardio dumps and probably gets himself finished. We've seen that in just about all of his fights here. 10 of his 11 career wins have come inside the first round, but all 3 of his UFC fights, he's been finished inside the first 2 rounds. Only made it to the second round in one of those and got himself finished and dominated in that one. So it's basically like he has about a 2 to 3 minute period to pull off that early finish. If you can withstand that early pressure, you can make this guy quit. You can make him wilt and probably dominate. And Salvador does have power in his own hands. He's another Contender Series fighter. 13 of his 14 wins have come by knockout. The biggest concern with Salvador is he's super reckless defensively, and we have seen him clipped. We have seen him knocked out on the regional scene, but I just don't think it's really going to matter in this style of a matchup. As long as he can stay safe through those first couple minutes, I think he dominates here. I think he gets De Silva out of there. So Salvador by knockout is the official pick. And again, this is another one, 13 fight slate, but these first 2 fights are some of my favorite ones to target on DraftKings this week. Next fight up in the featherweight division, we have Eric Silva coming in as a pick'em against downtown TJ Brown. And this is a matchup that I think is very enticing, because we have Eric Silva, another Dana White Contender Series fighter from this past season, and he won by first round knockout there. He's actually won his last 6 fights inside the first round. He's the former featherweight champ over in Lux promotion. The biggest knock on this guy is we have yet to see him tested against any meaningful competition. But that's not his fault that he hasn't faced the best competition. It doesn't mean that he can't look good against better competition. Obviously, TJ Brown is going to be a step up for him, but stylistically speaking, I actually think this is a good matchup that favors Eric Silva here. Eric Silva is very explosive with his striking. He's got powerful leg kicks that he throws everything into. He's got power in his hands as well, has a bunch of wins by knockout. He's very explosive early in the fight, and you see that by all the first round finishes, but a lot of times he's only striking to set up his ground game. He doesn't have a bad ground game either. He can take you down, and once he gets in favorable positions, he is hunting for a finish. He's good at finding the back. He's got a couple rear naked chokes on his record. I think that's live here against TJ Brown, who I think basically just has one path to victory, and that involves multiple takedowns and just ground control. And yes, that's possible. We've seen TJ Brown implement that game plan multiple times. The reason why I don't trust this guy is because, for starters, his durability is not good, right? We've seen him knocked out multiple times. He's been hurt in a lot of his fights. Whenever he's forced into multiple striking exchanges, I think he's a liability in terms of his durability. And then the cardio. Yes, he pushes a hard wrestling pace and he looks decent doing it, but he gasses out just about every single time. You know, we saw that fight going back years, like the Jordan Griffin fight. He was dominating Jordan Griffin on the mat and a lot of times was in dominant position and then still managed to get himself submitted here. So even if you question the level of competition of Silva, I think Silva has more ways to win this fight, and I just don't trust TJ Brown, even at a pick'em price. I'm leaning into the variance of Eric Silva. I actually think he has more upside than others give him credit for. So give me Eric Silva. I actually bet him half a unit to win by knockout at plus 500 because, again, that durability at Brown I think is a real issue, and just how explosive Silva is early in the fight. I don't hate that. I think there's value on the money line as well, but I'm just going to wait because it seems like most people are liking the TJ Brown side, so I'm hoping to get potentially a little bit of plus money maybe come Saturday on the Eric Silva side. Next fight up, Billy Quarantino comes in as a minus 170 favorite. The comeback on Alexander Hernandez is plus 145. We have Hernandez dropping down to 145 here, and I just have concerns with Hernandez for multiple reasons. You know, we've seen he started off his career really hot in the UFC. Since he got humbled and knocked out by Donald Cerrone, I just don't think he's the same guy. And now I think dropping down a weight class here, I think you're just seeing a guy who's just kind of lost and searching to find something here. And I don't think that's a fighter that I want to back, even at a little bit of plus money here, because I do think it's a pretty difficult matchup against Billy Quarantino, who always is willing to fight through adversity, who's always going to bring high output into his fight, mix in the takedowns as well. I'm not sure if that's going to be the game plan here, but I do think he has the potential to do so, especially if we see Hernandez cardio start to go, because we know Quarantino is going to be there for 15 minutes if he needs to. And I just trust his output more. I trust the durability more. I don't want any part of Alexander Hernandez. It just seems like even the times where he does look good for a couple minutes, he just starts to panic whenever he gets hit, whenever he gets put in a bad spot. He's just not a guy that I think is willing to be smart and fight through it and push through that adversity. So give me Billy Quarantino by decision. That's the official pick. He's an okay play on DraftKings due to the high output, but not a core play for me this week. Next up, we have Joaquin Buckley coming in as a minus 160 favorite. The comeback on Chris Curtis is plus 140. And I gotta say, I'm leaning towards the underdog here in Chris Curtis because I think what we have is a competitive striking match that's closer to 50-50 than these betting odds suggest. And the reason for that is because on one hand, you have Joaquin Buckley, who, yes, he has the obvious power. 11 of his 15 wins have come by knockout. Occasionally, he will mix in the takedowns, mix in the wrestling, but he is low output on the feet, and he does tend to slow down as well. And then on the flip side, Chris Curtis, we know he's excellent at stuffing takedowns, so I don't even expect that to be part of this fight for Joaquin Buckley. I don't think he's going to have any success trying to wrestle Chris Curtis here because basically everybody that's tried to do so in the UFC so far has not been able to, and I don't think Buckley's better than some of the other people that he's faced in terms of mixing in the takedowns here. So I'm expecting this to be a striking match. I'm expecting Chris Curtis to get off in more volume. Chris Curtis has arguably just as much power as Buckley on the feet. So I just think we have a really close striking fight. I favor the guy who's going to be a little bit more active, land more punches in volume, and I think has a little bit better durability as well. Of course, Buckley's been knocked out 3 times in his career. So give me Chris Curtis by decision. That's the official pick. Next up in the middleweight division, Edmund the Golden Boy Shabazian comes in as a minus 295 favorite with the comeback on Dalcha Lunga plus 245. And this is a clear setup fight for the Golden Boy Edmund Shabazian here. You know, we've seen him face really the best of the best in this division for the most part. And yes, he's lost his last couple fights, but those are really tough competitions. And he looked pretty good early on in a couple of those spots. So I just think they're giving him a very favorable matchup. They want him to get back in the win column here. And I really think he could win this fight wherever it goes. Dalcha Lunga is on a 3-fight losing streak. His only 2 wins in the UFC have been against guys that have now been cut by the promotion. So I just don't think he's very good. Low volume on the feet, mixes in takedowns, but not at a high rate, and tends to slow down himself and has durability issues himself. I think Sabbagha can hurt him on the feet. I think Sabbagha can take him down and out grapple him as well. The only concern with Sabbagha is, of course, the cardio, because he's historically a front runner himself. But if we expect Lunga and Bola to fade as well, then it's like not even that much of a concern as much as it would be in other style matchups. So give me Sabbagha by knockout. That's the official pick, and I actually think he's one of the better spend-up options this week on DraftKings. Next up in the bantamweight division, we have Raul Rosas Jr. coming in as a -230 favorite with Jay Perrin on the comeback at +195. We'll start with Rosas Jr. He is the youngest current fighter on the UFC roster. He, of course, fought on this past season of Dana White Contender Series. A lot of buzz because he fought that fight at just 17 years old. He has since turned 18 years old, but he's still the youngest fighter here. He claims he's going to beat Jon Jones' record as the youngest fighter to win a UFC championship. Let's hold our horses a little bit here and start with this matchup against Jay Perrin. I do think it favors Rosas Jr. because I do expect him to push that high-level grappling pace. This dude comes from a high-level grappling background. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and as we saw, even though he was unable to finish Mondo Gutierrez on that Contender Series fight, we saw the grappling at display. And yes, there were times where he did fall out of position. He got a little bit overzealous going for the finish, trying to pull off some of these fancy submission attempts, but I still rate him as a high-level grappler here, and I do expect him to be able to take Jay Perrin down, and he has that smothering style of grappling where I think he's going to have success. And even though Perrin historically has been difficult to hold down and take down, I still think it's just going to be Rosas Jr. winning minutes here by pressuring him up against the fence, taking him down. Even if Perrin pops back up, I think Rosas is still going to be controlling him against the fence, taking him down again, mat returning him. And if Rosas does end up getting a favorable position, that's where I think he could actually hold Perrin down, maybe force him to give up his back and possibly snatch up a submission here. But I do think there is a world where he's just kind of being the better minute winner, but it ends up being sort of a bust on DraftKings, because if he doesn't get that finish and this ends up being just a bunch of, cage control up against the fence, really not a ton of volume on either side, I think both guys could potentially bust. So even though I favor Rosas Jr. to win here, I don't know if the DraftKings ceiling is quite there without a first round sub, and I'm just not sure if this is the matchup where that comes to fruition. So give me Rosas Jr. The pick is going to be by submission, but I think it probably would come later in the fight, or potentially decision as well. But either way, I think Rosas Jr. gets his hand race here. I think Jay Perrin's going to be walking back all that crazy talk this week. Which brings us to the featured bout on the prelims as Jairzinho Rozenstruik comes in as a -170 favorite. The comeback on Chris Dawkins is +140. And this is one where it's your typical, two powerful heavyweights that I think are going to eventually meet in the middle and trade. Not quite to the extent that we saw with Sergey Pavlovich and Tai Tuivasa last week, but I still think at some point these guys are going to get in there and exchange in the pocket. And I do think somebody's going to get knocked out here. I trust the power of Rozenstruik. I trust the technical ability, and I actually trust the durability a lot more than Chris Dawkins here, who does have fast hands. He does have power in his own right. 11 of his 12 wins have come by knockout, but he has been knocked out 4 times in his career. I think Rozenstruik is just going to be a little bit sharper on the feet, can mix in the leg kicks, and eventually find that kill shot. So give me Rozenstruik by knockout. That's the official pick, but in terms of DraftKings, I will have some exposure to both sides because I wouldn't be shocked if either guy won by knockout this weekend. And before we get to the main card, do me a favor, guys, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps me out a lot. Only takes 2 seconds and it goes a long way. I definitely appreciate it. Kicking off the main card, we have Bryce Mitchell facing off against Ilia Topuria. This is my favorite matchup of the entire card. It's in the featherweight division. Both guys are undefeated. Topuria is currently a -140 favorite with Bryce Mitchell on the comeback at +120. And this is just a matchup that I'm very excited for. Topuria, 12-0 prospect, 11 wins coming inside the distance. We know he has that powerful boxing style. He can take you down as well. He's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The only blemish that we've seen from him is the one time where he did go the full 15 minutes. We did see him start to slow down as the fight got into the later minutes there, and now he's facing somebody in Bryce Mitchell who's a relentless style grappler. He averages 3.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. I think Bryce Mitchell is actually the better submission grappler here. I think he's potentially more likely to land takedowns to control Toporia on the mat, because when Bryce Mitchell takes you down, you typically don't get up. And I think if he can stay alive and not get hurt in the striking exchanges, I do think eventually he will realize that grappling success. So give me Bryce Mitchell at plus money. I backed him at plus 120. I think any plus money is good here. I think we're getting the better overall fighter who's more proven over 15 minutes, and I think we're just kind of fading the hype train to a sense, because I do think Toporia is a great prospect in his own right. I just think Bryce Mitchell is one hell of a fighter to deal with, especially when you expect there to be multiple grappling sequences in this fight. So Bryce Mitchell by decision, that's the official pick, but I will have exposure to both sides on DraftKings. Next fight up in the middleweight division, Dricus Du Plessis comes in as a minus 175 favorite with the comeback on Darren Till at plus 150. And this is another fun matchup here. Dricus Du Plessis, 16 of his 17 wins have come inside the distance. The only one was his last fight against Brad Tavares, who that fight was very exciting. He had a couple moments in that fight where you thought he was going to get a finish, but he ended up going the full 15 minutes. Pretty dominant win there. He's a solid fighter, great finisher. The only concern is he is reckless defensively, and I do think, there are certain matchups that can give him real problems in this division. The problem is, I don't think Darren Till is really one of those. If you go back to when Darren Till was at 170, if you include some of those fights, he's now lost 4 of his last 5 fights. He's historically not a great minute winner. Yes, he does have power. 10 of his 18 wins have come by knockout, but he's very low output for the most part on the feet. And I think you really have to factor in the durability, not in the sense that, he's chinny, he'll get knocked out by one big punch. That's always possible for mostly anybody, but that's not really what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is I just think his body is starting to really wear on him. And what I mean by that is now we've seen him time and time again with these big injuries. Like he broke his collarbone, pulled out of a fight for that. His last fight against Derek Brunson, torn ACL. Like he just seems like he's always fighting through some sort of injury. And as much as I love Darren Till, I think his body just really can't take it. Like we saw it with TJ Dillashaw, like the shoulder out immediately. Like I think if we were going to get a fight on a pay-per-view where we always seem to have some sort of weird fluke, big time injury, whatever you want to describe it as, I think this is probably the fight, and I think it's probably Darren Till. And even in this camp for this fight, he mentioned, he had an eye poke so bad that it touched his brain. Like I'm telling you, there's always something with Till getting hurt or some sort of injury, which I know that's super narrative based, but even stylistically, I think Du Plessis has the potential to hurt him. I think Du Plessis is the better submission grappler. If he does take this fight to the mat, I think he could sub Darren Till here. So I have no interest in backing Till. I backed him a bunch in the past. I've lost on him a bunch, so maybe I'm just scorned by betting Darren Till. I'll be rooting for Darren Till, but I'm not going to bet this fight. In terms of DraftKings, I'll have a little bit of both sides, but I am going to lean towards the Du Plessis side because I think the finishing ability is for real. So give me Du Plessis inside the distance this weekend. Next fight up, we have Santiago Ponzinibbio coming in as a minus 180 favorite with the comeback on Alex Morono at plus 155. This was originally supposed to be Robbie Lawler coming in as a big underdog against Ponzinibbio here. Now we're getting Morono stepping in on short notice after Lawler pulled out. And I actually do have at least a little bit of interest in Morono. I haven't bet him yet, but I do think this is, for the most part, going to be a competitive kickboxing fight. And I think Ponzinibbio has proven that, yes, he can still hang at this division, but he's certainly not in the elite tier of this division. And Moreno's kind of been looking career best, in my opinion. He's on a nice little win streak here. He's a high volume striker. I think he can match the output of Ponzinibbio. And I think I actually trust Morono's durability a little bit more than Ponzinibbio at this stage in his career. So I do think it's going to be competitive, and I do think it's going to be close. But in that scenario, I'll take the plus 150, plus 155 guy. So give me Alex Morono. Morono by decision is the official pick. Oh, Patty the Batty. Oh, Patty the Batty. Oh, Patty the Batty. Oh, Patty the Batty. Let's go. We got Patty Pimlet coming in as a minus 250 favorite. The comeback on Jared Gordon is plus 210. And obviously, I'm a Paddy guy by nature. I'm a big fan of the guy, but I try to keep that aside when breaking down the fights. Now, spoiler alert, I do have a bet on Paddy Pimlet here. I bet him inside the distance at minus 115. And the reason being, I think Paddy Pimlet, this is a decent matchup for him, but I'm aware that, he's not a great minute winner. We've seen moments and periods in pretty much all of his fights where it's like, hey, this guy has real holes that certain fighters are going to be able to take advantage of. Now, is Jared Gordon one of those fighters? Potentially, yeah, he could be. He mixes in takedowns, so averages around 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. We know he has a solid ground game coming from that Philly BJJ background. And I just think the striking, is probably competitive. I think Pimlet is the much more powerful striker. Gordon, never really known as a power guy. He's more of a volume, decent jab, stay tight, stay technical. But Pimlet, I do think, has a clear power advantage. And we know the durability of Gordon is a real concern. He's been knocked out multiple times in his career. He's been hurt multiple times. I think Pimlet could potentially clip him on the feet. And even in the scenario where it's like, yeah, Gordon maybe takes him down, gets on top, gets in favorable position, and even if he wins a round, that's fine. But I don't think you can overlook the finishing ability of Paddy Pimlet, whether it's on the feet or on the mat. And I think that's one thing, where people who are just hopping on every dog that faces Paddy Pimlet, I think that's one thing that people overlook is like, yes, there are real reasons why this guy can be exposed, and I do think at some point he will be exposed. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's Gordon. The reason why I don't think it is because I think people just completely overlook fighters like that who have real finishing ability. I am kind of like that too with Roman Dolidze, who we just saw last fight against Jack Hermansson, where it's like Hermansson was blowing him out, won basically every minute of that fight, and Dolidze ends up finishing him. And I think Paddy Pimlet is in that mold as well. You can add guys like Davison Figueiredo. Like, these guys are just not great minute winners, but they are very good and above average finishers. And I think that's where it's such like a gray area because people can't really quantify that. And I can't either, right? But it basically comes down to me is, do I think there's value on the money line at Paddy Pimlet? No, I don't. But I think he's going to win, and I think he's going to finish. So at minus 115, I think that's the best way to play him here because I do think the durability is a real concern for Jared Gordon, even if he's able to win a couple minutes here. I think at some point he gets clipped. Maybe Paddy, takes him down himself, finds the back, chokes him out. So yeah, give me Paddy Pimlet. I think Paddy gets it done, keeps the train rolling this weekend. Next fight up, we have the light heavyweight championship here between Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz. Ankalaev a minus 285 favorite with Blachowicz on the comeback at plus 240. And as you know, this was originally supposed to be Yuri Prohaska and Glover Teixeira, which would have been an absolute banger matchup. So unfortunately, we're getting a little bit more of a dull matchup between Ankalaev and Blachowicz here. I do think Ankalaev stylistically does have multiple advantages here. I think he's much more technical on the feet. Blachowicz is a decent striker himself, does have that Polish power, but I think Ankalaev has underrated power himself. And I think if he's able to mix in the ground game, and I do think he's capable of doing that, it's just a question mark of whether or not that's going to be in the game plan here. But I think over 5 rounds, if he does need to go to that, he has that in his back pocket. I do think he's the rightful favorite here. So give me Ankalaev. Ankalaev by decision is the official pick. A later stoppage wouldn't surprise me, but I do think it probably goes the full 25 minutes. It just depends on how aggressive Ankalaev wants to get here. So Ankalaev by decision is the official pick. And as always, you can check out fightnumbers.com where I'll have DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier. I'll have ownership projections as well, pre-late swap edition, and there's line movement page, a bunch of other stuff. It's completely free, fightnumbers.com. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Best of luck, and we'll see you guys next time.